strengthen our relationship with America, and indispensable partners in defence and security. And it's why this weekend I've been hosting European leaders here in London to work together for the security of the United Kingdom, Ukraine, and Europe as a whole. Through my discussions over recent days, we've agreed that the UK, France, and others will work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting. Then we'll discuss that plan with the United States and take it forward together. The purpose of today's meeting was to unite our partners around this effort, to strengthen Ukraine and to support a just and enduring peace for the good of all of us. Our starting point must be to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position now, so that they can negotiate from a position of strength. And we are doubling down in our support. Yesterday evening, the UK signed a £2.2 billion loan to provide more military aid to Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. And today I'm announcing a new deal, which allows Ukraine to use £1.6 billion of UK export finance to buy more than 5,000 air defence missiles, which will be made in Belfast, creating jobs in our brilliant defence sector. This will be vital for protecting critical infrastructure now and strengthening Ukraine in securing the peace when it comes. Because we have to learn from the mistakes of the past. We cannot accept a weak deal like Minsk, which Russia can breach with ease. Instead, any deal must be backed by strength. Every nation must contribute to that in the best way that it can, bringing different capabilities and support to the table, but all taking responsibility to act, all stepping up their own share of the burden. So we agreed some important steps today. First, we will keep the military aid flowing and keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia to strengthen Ukraine now. Second, we agreed that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and Ukraine must be at the table. Third, in the event of a peace deal, we will keep boosting Ukraine's own defensive capabilities to deter any future invasion. Fourth, we will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back. Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing. We're working with the US on this point after my meeting with President Trump last week. And let me be clear, we agree with the President on the urgent need for a durable peace. Now we need to deliver together. Finally, we agreed that leaders will meet again very soon to keep the pace behind these actions and to keep working towards this shared plan. We are at a crossroads in history today. This is not a moment for more talk. It's time to act, time to step up and lead, and to unite around a new plan for a just and enduring peace. Thank you. I will now take a number of questions, starting, I think, with you, Beth, at Sky.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Watching President Trump berate a wartime president and defender of European freedom in the Oval Office said to many people what you've already said in a way, that everything has changed. Given that the US has become an unreliable ally. Did you, as European leaders, discuss the prospect of actually going it alone, and actually what the reality of a US pulling out of this, all of this, would mean? Do you think you really do need the US? And if you do you think the coalition of the willing will be enough to bring President Trump back around? Thank you.
Well, first, in relation to last Friday, nobody wanted to see what happened last Friday, but I do not accept that the US is an unreliable ally. The US has been a reliable ally to the UK for many, many decades and continues to be. There are no two countries as closely aligned as our two countries, and our defence, our security and intelligence is intertwined in a way no two other countries are. So it's an important and reliable ally for us. The discussions we've had today, particularly the coalition of the willing, is on the basis that this is a plan that we will work with the US, and that it will have US backing. So that is the purpose of the plan, and that is why I spoke to President Trump last night before we developed the work on this plan. Thank you. I've got Robert from ITV.
Hello, Robert President, ITV. I want to sort of put to you what will be on the minds of millions of British people. With your commitment in the event of a peace deal to deploy British soldiers to Ukraine, is there now a more real prospect of Britain being at war with Russia? Can you rule that out?
The whole point of a guarantee for any deal, or if there is a deal, is to preserve the peace. And if you want to preserve the peace, you have to be prepared to defend the peace. So the reason I've been forward-leaning on this is because I want to avoid conflict, because I do not want conflict in Ukraine, in Europe, and certainly not in the United Kingdom. I want stability in the United Kingdom. The way to ensure that stability is to ensure that we are able to defend a deal in Ukraine, because the one thing our history tells us is that if there is conflict in Europe, it will wash up on our shores. And already in the last 3 years, what's happened in Ukraine has had a massive impact on many working people back here in the United Kingdom, because their bills have gone up, their energy bills have gone up. There's been an instability in our economy caused by that conflict. So we are not unaffected by it. And of course, our own security and defence depends on the defence and security of Europe. So every step I am taking is in order to preserve peace, to avoid conflict, because the safety and security of the British people is my number one duty and responsibility, and I take it very seriously. Thank you. Chris at the BBC.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason, BBC News. After what happened the other night between Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy, do you feel a greater personal responsibility alongside President Macron and others for delivering a workable peace? And on the coalition of the willing, as you've described it today, are you persuading more people to join it? Thank you.
On the question of responsibility, I do think the United Kingdom should step up and lead. We have done that historically as a nation, and we need to do it again. And that is why we're moving forward on this. On the coalition of the willing, yes, a number of countries have indicated today that they want to be part of the plan that we are developing. I'll leave them to make their own statements about exactly how they want to make that contribution. But we've been able to move that forward. I accept without criticism and with respect the position of other countries that may not feel that they want to contribute in that way. But I strongly feel that unless some move forward, we will stay in the position we're in and not be able to move forward. And therefore, it is a deliberate plan to ensure that we get some momentum and pace here. And it is intended to preserve the peace, and it's intended to ensure that we stay in lockstep with the United States, which is my strongly held belief the best way to preserve security and defence in Europe and security and defence in the United Kingdom.
Any sense of how many join the vote?
Well, a number indicated today that they wanted to be part of the more forward-looking element. I will, rather than speak for them in terms of exactly how they'll make that known and what their contribution will be, I'll leave that to them. But I'm pleased that a number did indicate that they do think that this is a plan worth backing and that they want to play a part in it. And so we've made real progress today in the course of the last few hours. Thank you. Alex.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Alex Wickham from Bloomberg.
Bloomberg, I'm sorry.
On your coalition of the willing, do you think it can be bolstered by countries that aren't just in Europe? Essentially, we've got Canada represented here today. Do you think you could get countries beyond Europe to join the coalition of the willing, essentially make it almost a transatlantic partnership? And also, in terms of your plan to present back to Donald Trump, how soon do you need to get that done? Is that something that really needs to happen very quickly in days? Thank you.
On the countries beyond Europe, obviously we had Canada here, who've traditionally taken a forward-leaning role. They've been working very hard with us on issues like training, and they've been a reliable ally. And I'm encouraging of that because they are already deeply vested in Ukraine. As I say, they've worked on the training, amongst other things. Yes, on the question of the US, look, I spoke to President Trump last night. I'm not going to go through the details of that conversation, but I would not be taking this step down this road if I didn't think that it was something that would yield a positive outcome in terms of ensuring that we move together, Ukraine, Europe, the UK and the US, together towards a lasting peace. And so that's the way I've approached this in the last few days. Hugo, from the I News.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Hugo Jai from the iPaper. Obviously, the other party that would need to sign up to any future peace deal is Russia. President Trump has said he wants to talk to Russia. You're coming up with a peace deal without Russia's involvement. What makes you think that Russia can be persuaded to sign up to this deal that's been agreed by its enemies?
Well, in the end, a deal will have to involve Russia. Of course it will. But we can't approach this on the basis that Russia dictates the terms of any security guarantee before we've even got to a deal. Otherwise, we won't make any progress at all. It is, for a deal to be done, but if a deal is done, it has to be a deal that is then defended. Because what we've seen in the past is a cessation of the hostilities without any backup, and that was readily breached by Russia. And that is precisely the situation that I think we need to avoid this time around, which is why we're going down this road. Antonello, please, from La Repubblica.
Thank you, Mr. Antonio Guerra from La Repubblica. The Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who you had a bilateral meeting earlier today, said that the West must not split on Ukraine. How can you try to convince Meloni and other European leaders that your plan and your coalition of the willing, is the right thing, and to persuade them to join? And do you fear that the West might split on this? Thank you.
Well, firstly, I had a very good bilateral meeting with Georgia this morning. We had the first bilateral brunch, I think, in the history of British-Italian relations. So that was a first. We get on personally very well. And she's very in, I don't want to speak for her, but I think her position is well known, that Europe and the US have to stand together and that bond must always be strong. So there's a huge amount of common ground between the way I see this and the way Georgia sees this, particularly the view that it is important for the security and defence of Italy, of Europe and the United Kingdom, that we work as we've always worked, closely aligned with the United States. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
You've just been watching British Prime Minister Keir Starmer talking to the folks there at the summit in London regarding backing Ukraine and threading the line a little bit, I think, between bolstering European strength behind Ukraine on the one hand, and also keeping Washington closer to its side. The British Prime Minister saying Europe must do the heavy lifting, but must have strong U.S. backing. DW Terry Schultz is still with us from Brussels, watching the affairs. Terry, what did you make of what you just heard from the British Prime Minister?
You know, Keir Starmer definitely sees this as a very dramatic moment, calling this a crossroads in history. At the same time, the plan that he outlined, the multi-step plan, didn't sound like it had a lot of new elements from what we've heard, you know, being discussed among both EU countries, NATO countries, the combination like there is there today. At the same time, if everybody in the room agreed to this, it does give him and Emmanuel Macron the heft to go to the United States and say, look, we've got everybody behind these ideas. At the same time, remember that when they're talking about creating a potential monitoring force for a potential ceasefire, an eventual ceasefire in Ukraine, he did make the point that this will depend, as I mentioned earlier, on American guarantees. Now, perhaps the thing that perked up my ears the most is that he was asked, do you have any sign that Donald Trump would agree to this? And he said, look, I talked to Trump last night on the phone, and if I didn't think I could get him there, we wouldn't be moving ahead with this plan. So that is a really essential part of any peace plan moving forward. But clearly, Keir Starmer thinks that he can make this happen, and that's really important.
No question. We can't stress enough how many times he mentioned the United States and their support. He said that U.S. support remains essential. How is that going to happen?
Yeah, that's we don't know, and he didn't go into it. But clearly, Starmer and Emmanuel Macron both have lines open to President Trump. I believe they've both spoken with him after the debacle in Washington on Friday night. I mean, we obviously know that Starmer did. You also have the key ally of Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, who even since the Friday night incident happened, said that he's friends with Donald Trump, that he speaks to him often. He took Trump's side against Volodymyr Zelensky, saying Zelensky needs to fix the relationship. So you do have these three men who have good relationships with Trump, and if they can't make it happen, I don't know who can. And they obviously feel that they do, because all of these other European leaders are sitting in the room thinking, you're asking us to put our people in harm's way, and we don't have any idea how to protect them, because U.S. assistance is essential. The other thing I heard was that he said, that Starmer said, look, we need more countries to come forward. So I don't know how enthusiastically other countries agreed to this. He said we need more to volunteer, otherwise we can't move forward with this. The other thing I heard that was important is that he said that the first thing he mentioned was that in this agreement, they are going to keep the economic pressure on Russia. Now, this is a signal to Washington, who is right now in negotiations with Moscow to drop sanctions. Europe is not going down that road. Nobody in Europe is ready to drop sanctions on Russia. In fact, they're constantly negotiating new packages of sanctions. So those are the things that sort of perked up my ears. Not necessarily new, but sort of important information to fill out what we already know.
And of course, making sure that Ukraine is strong so that they're in the best position to negotiate with Russia, announcing this £1.6 billion plan to help Ukraine build a defense system. That's DW's correspondent Terry Schultz in Brussels. Many, many, many thanks, Terry.
Pleasure to be here.
Outgoing German Chancellor Olaf Scholz also attended the summit in London. Scholz is heading the German government in a caretaker role after his election defeat last weekend. Here's some of what Scholz had to say after the summit ended.
We are together allies in the transatlantic alliance, and this is still the key of the security of the United States, Canada and European states, member of NATO. In the last years, we enlarged NATO with new members like Finland and Sweden. We increased our spending for defense in Europe and in the United States, and this is the path we will follow in the future as well. And on the other hand, it is key that we all are understanding that it is our common task to support Ukraine, because it's a threat to the security architecture, not just of Europe, but also the world, that Russia invaded its neighbor country just for conquering part of the territory or all the territory. We cannot accept this, and we cannot accept that borders will be changed by force. So this is the basis for our cooperation, and everyone is willing to work on making this happen in the future as well. Aside of this, it is clear that every one of us is doing in our own interest what is necessary here. This means we will have to find ways to increase our defense spending, which is already planned. You know, Germany is spending 2% of its GDP for defense and is now discussing how to continue this increased spending and possibly even more due to NATO capabilities in the next years to come. And this is the same in many other European countries, and also when we look at the support to Ukraine. So I think the big task is to manage that this cooperation will continue.
DW Chief Political Editor Michaela Kufner is with me now in the studio. Michaela, what did you make of the outgoing German Chancellor's remarks?
Well, it was very interesting that he spoke at the same time as Keir Starmer, so we had to divide Labour here as well. He, before he got asked this question, which is a more profound question on the future of NATO and whether it will hold as an alliance, he kept stressing in his address that it was necessary to bolster Ukraine's ability to defend itself, also against any future attacks. And this somewhat jars with what Donald Trump said when he had this very unwelcoming reception or the scene in the White House when Donald Trump insisted, look, just having US people there in that mineral deal, there's no need for guarantees, just having US presence there will be enough. And that clearly is not enough for the Europeans. So to anybody asking themselves, okay, what does this mean? Is there a breakup between the EU and the US, or isn't there? Well, they're still on the same team, but clearly the Europeans, and along with them, Olaf Scholz, the still Chancellor of Germany, Europe's largest economy, are essentially introducing another language into these negotiations. Before it was Russian and US-American. Now it's clear Europe wants to do a bit of the drafting, but it's also willing to come up with the goods in terms of committing to serious defence spending in the future.
What else did Scholz say about the summit?
Well, he felt that he was specifically asked about what his role is right now, because we just had elections, and the future leader, most likely Friedrich Merz, the winner of the elections, the conservative CDU-CSU leader, wasn't at the table. He says everybody's fulfilling their roles here, and he's doing that by attending this summit, by making this firm commitment towards a future for Ukraine, bolstering Ukraine, which is interesting because his election campaign was partially also running on being cautious and not being too abrasive, not committing to too much in terms of both spending, but also in which weapons are delivered. And at the same time, he made clear that he is in communication whenever necessary with who is most likely the next leader of Germany, Friedrich Merz.
You made that clear, not promising too much. Will his remarks be seen as very strong support, robust support for Ukraine?
Germany currently, and that's the whole problem, is not in the position of having a chancellor on his way out and the next chancellor not quite in, to be able to make any commitments. And what is part of these tedious negotiations here right now, potentially tedious ones, is how they're going to ensure this huge spending package that is needed. And here both sides are still being tactical because finding the money will require yet more debt, and they need to find a way to make this happen. And this may well involve the old parliament with the old majorities rather than the newly elected one.
As you know too well, Olaf Scholz lost the election last week. Is he viewed right now by other European leaders as a lame duck?
The short answer is yes. The appointments, let's put it this way, I saw the schedule of Friedrich Merz, the future chancellor, at the Munich Security Conference, and I saw his list, and it was quite clear. And also, particularly the United States Vice President met only with the future likely leader of Germany, but not with Olaf Scholz. And that's also the way he's being viewed. At the same time, the German voice is needed because German money and commitment is needed.
How long will the other European players here have to wait for the prominent position in Germany, for the new chancellor to step in and make his mark?
If I had a precise answer, I would be earning some serious money here. But Germany is moving fast. It's exactly 1 week after the elections, and we know that the second exploratory talks for the next coalition is already happening tomorrow. For Germany, that is lightning fast. It can take normally months until a coalition can be formed, and all parties sitting down at their table on Monday know they simply do not have the time.
That's DW's chief political editor, Michaela Kufner. As always, many thanks, Michaela.
You're welcome.
And a reminder of the news at this hour. The British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, says European leaders meeting at a summit in London have agreed to keep aid flowing to Ukraine and still consider the U.S. to be a reliable ally. Europe must do the heavy lifting for Ukraine, he said, while needing U.S. backing. Any peace deal would have to include Russia, which cannot be allowed to dictate terms. Starmer said now is the time to act rather than talk, and that economic pressure on Russia would be kept up. He also announced a new €1.9 billion deal to enable Ukraine to buy 5,000 air defense missiles. We will end it on that note. There's more news at DW.com and, of course, on our social media channels. I'll be back in a few minutes at the top of the hour with the latest on that Ukraine summit taking place in London. I'm Michael Oku from me and the rest of the team here. Thanks for watching. This is DW.
DW Travel.
Hello there.
Let's go. The sights, the history, the food.
Very good.
Garnished with insider tips and local highlights.
Wow. Welcome. Let's go.
Shall we go that way? Let's go that way.
But also when it comes to sustainability, information and trends, on DW Travel, you can have it all.
This is unexpected. Okay, I have to check this out.
So, you're planning a trip? Make sure you miss nothing about it